Here's Dr. Pepper.
Hey, and welcome back to Dr. Pepper and Friends, where grit and grace come together for wholehearted living. So the last episode, we kind of started with a simple but a really powerful idea. Most of us are trying to live strong on the outside, but we also feel kind of divided on the inside. So what we said was that maybe the issue isn't that there's something wrong with you, okay? Maybe it's that you've been trying to understand yourself, and if it's kind of as if you've only had just this one voice. So we introduced this idea: what if your mind is not a single voice, but more of a system? All right. So today we're going to build that out. Okay, and this is kind of the core idea of a modality called internal family systems. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Okay, it's kind of one of those things where the mind is a system, so it's made up of a lot of different parts, and it's not random by any stretch of the imagination. It's not chaotic, and it's kind of organized like a system should be. So think less mess and more organization. So each part has a role, each part has a perspective, each part has a job. And here's the key. Every part is really trying to help you. Now, it may not feel this way because some of your parts kind of make life harder. Some of your parts frustrate you. And some of your parts really kind of get you in trouble at times, right? But underneath all of that, there is a logic to what they're doing. Now, I want us to spend a little time and think about that because I want to make this real. Because what you've got is you've got a part of you that procrastinates sometimes, and a part of you that criticizes at times, a part of you that avoids, and a part that sometimes even people pleases. So the procrastinator might say something like, let's don't do this right now. I mean, we need to cut our toenails, or whatever your procrastinator says. The critic says, that just wasn't good enough, right? And you failed in some kind of way. The avoider says, this feels really uncomfortable, so let's deuces, let's get out here, all right? The people pleaser says, keep everybody happy no matter what, okay? So here's the mistake that a lot of people make, and they think that those parts are really the problem. But internal family systems therapy says, these parts are really trying to solve a problem, all right? So what is the problem? Let me kind of give you the basic structure, all right? So there are three main types of parts. And one is kind of your core center, okay? And that's your sense of self, and that is your sense of self. So there's these three categories of parts outside of your sense of self, and these parts are on the inside, right? So managers, firefighters, and exiles. Now let's walk through those. Now first we kind of have the self. At the center of your system is what internal family system therapy calls the self. The self really isn't a part, but it contains the parts. It's the core of who you are, all right? So I want you to think about where you are and what you're doing, okay, when you're the most calm, the most curious, the most compassionate, the most clear, the most connected. That's maybe when you're being your truest sense of self. So it's that part of you that can take a step back and say, something's going on the inside of me right now. And when that happens, it's steady, it's grounded, it doesn't panic. And here's kind of the big idea. I mean, healing happens when the self leads the system. So when that part of you that is your truest sense of self, or maybe a way I would say it, the one that's really functioning as the image bearer of Christ, when that one's in charge, then everything else kind of takes shape the way that it's supposed to. But now let's think about what these parts kind of do, because think about it like this. I mean, you were made in the image of God, but then life happens, things happen, harm happens, trauma happens, all of these things happen. And when that happens, our flesh begins to kick in and tries to cope with that as best as the flesh can. So what in the spiritual realm, what kind of happens in all of that is that as we walk with Christ, as we are sanctified with Him, then we're kind of moving away from our flesh and those parts that want to manage it, and we're moving into walking with the Spirit and becoming the person that God's really intended for us to be all along, okay? But in the meantime, we have these parts that make up our flesh that we kind of do what we don't want to do and don't do what we want to do sometimes. And sometimes it's because these parts are in charge. So the first one is managers. Managers are proactive, okay? Managers try to run your life in a way that keeps things under control, okay? So these are your inner critic, your perfectionist, your planner, your people pleaser, your overthinker. And their job is simple, okay? Prevent pain, avoid emotional discomfort at all costs, okay? They're trying to make sure that you don't fail and that you don't get rejected and that you don't feel exposed and you don't get hurt. So they kind of manage everything. And the problem is they can become rigid, they can become controlling, and yeah, they can become exhausting at times. But again, they're trying to help, okay? That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to keep your life organized in such a way that you're avoiding emotional discomfort. All right, now the next category is firefighters. Now, firefighters kind of show up when something breaks through, okay? When something happens and emotions kind of get strong, when something inside feels really overwhelming, their job is not a long-term strategy. Their job is kind of immediate relief, okay? So they move fast, and something sometimes they move aggressively. Now, these are the parts that kind of shut you down, or you blow up in anger when these parts are in control, or maybe just numb out by whatever means, whether that's substances or what you're watching on a screen. Their job is to distract and to escape and to kind of distance you from anything that feels like emotional pain, but to do that quickly, okay? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to put out the fire. Okay, they're not trying to ruin your life. Okay, they're trying to stop the pain. All right. So here's the thing about firefighters, and this is just kind of important to know. Firefighters are kind of like when emotional discomfort breaks through and it shows up. They're kind of like, hey, there's some emotional discomfort, there's some pain, and they jump out of the bed and they jump onto the pole and slide down on the pole and put on their boots and the big coat and get on the big red fire truck, and they come rushing to yourself to try to rescue you in that moment. But the thing that they don't care about is whether they break the door down or whether there's water all over the house. I mean, they're just trying to rescue you from that emotional pain in that moment, but there's usually collateral damage that takes place. But as long as they've rescued you from the pain, they don't really care about that. But you are left to pick up the pieces of that. All right, and then there are also exiles. Now, exiles are the ones that are the wounded parts. They're the ones that probably got wounded early, when you were young, and they carry shame, and they carry fear, and they carry rejection, and they carry loneliness, and they carry grief. And they have been there for a long time, and they hold all of this emotional pain that at the time it was just too much. So if you were harmed in some way when you were 7 or when you were 13, you didn't have the emotional coping skills that you have now. You didn't have the maturity that you have now. You didn't have the knowledge that you have now. So what happens? Well, the system pushes them down. Okay, and it pushes them out of awareness of what's taking place, and that's why they're called exiles. They've been pushed away. So the entire system, managers, firefighters, all of these kind of organize around this one single goal. Don't let those parts get activated, those exiled parts of you get activated, because in your inside, what it's kind of saying is that, hey, this 7-year-old who's now maybe 37 can't handle all of this emotional stress. So let's do something to rescue him or her from that moment. All right. So now let's kind of bring all this together. All right. You've got exiles that are holding pain. All right. They are the ones that need to heal. And in therapy, that's kind of what we work toward. But you've got managers that are trying to prevent that pain from getting triggered. So you avoid therapy, you don't go. Or you avoid the books that are going to make you think about things that would be triggering for you. You avoid people that are going to trigger you. Okay. And then you've also got firefighters, and they step in when the pain breaks through. Now, all of this is happening inside of one system, and here's the problem, okay? When the self is not leading, when that Christ image bearer is not leading, the protectors take over. And that's when life starts to feel really reactive and feel confusing and feel out of control, right? So let's kind of make this really practical. Let's say that you're about to have a hard conversation and one of your managers shows up. Maybe it's your people pleaser or it's your organizer in some kind of way. So your manager shows up and says, okay, say this perfectly. Don't mess this up. And then another manager might say something like, well, don't say too much. Keep it safe, dial it back, all right? And then you feel anxiety. You feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do in this moment. So a firefighter steps in and says, hey, you know what? Let's just avoid this conversation altogether. Let's just shut her down and let's just go, watch Netflix, right? And underneath all of that, there may be this exile that's carrying a belief that's kind of like, if I'm being honest, I'm just going to be rejected. Now, suddenly, your behavior makes sense. Because it's all about avoiding that thing that leaves you feeling uncomfortable and unable to cope with it, almost like you're really small and really young again. So this is kind of where this all kind of becomes meaningful, because many of us were taught to deal with this by just trying harder, just be better, have more faith, pray more, get it together, have more spiritual discipline. But what if the goal isn't to overpower your internal world, but to understand it? There is a consistent pattern that we see in the life of Jesus. He moves toward brokenness. He moves toward exiles, not away from it. And often the parts of us that we're trying the hardest to push down are the very places where healing needs to begin. So here's something simple to just kind of practice this week. Okay, when you notice something in yourself, just pause. Okay, just slow down, just pause, and ask, what part of me is this? Okay, not what's wrong with me, and not some of those cruel things that we can say to ourselves, but what part of me is showing up right now? And then one more question: what is that part trying to do for me? Okay, that question alone can change how you begin to relate, really, to yourself. Now, in the next episode, we're going to go a little deeper with this into one of the more important pieces of kind of this whole model. We're going to talk about the self and what it means to really be the person that God designed you to be, what it is and what it's not, and how learning to lead from that place changes everything. Because when the self leads, okay, when that true image bearer of Christ leads, the system inside of you begins to settle, right? So for now, just remember this. You are not chaotic. You are not any more broken than anybody else. There is a system inside of you, and it makes more sense than you think, okay? And when you begin to understand the parts within you, you begin to lead your life with both grit and grace. So, I will see you in the next episode.